believe it or not, the days of the week are normalizing.
Kind of.
All right. It's a Tuesday, and then our press conferences, so that makes it a Talkin' Tuesday on the Podcast Daily. And Bill Landis is joining me, Austin Ward, as we prepare to get into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center and talk to Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly. A big day and a lot to cover.
There's a lot to cover. I think a lot of it good, right? Like I feel like I've sent some criticism, especially about the offensive game plan in the Cotton Bowl. I was just rewatching it. I just finished watching every snap. I actually thought it was pretty good. They just, don't commit 6 penalties, and I think it'll be all right. Is there a question for Chip Kelly there about making sure that guys don't do stuff after the whistle and get called for holding? I'm not entirely sure. I really thought they had a good plan against Texas, and it was an effective one. And I am wondering in the days after it, like, how much the tenor of that game might change I'm not trying to put it all on one guy, but like if that Trevion Henderson penalty doesn't happen. They're like the 38, I think, moving the ball really well. And then there's some stuff after the whistle that sets Ohio State back. So I thought that Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles both had good plans there, and probably a player too I know that they would want back. But in a game that did not feel the same way as Tennessee and Oregon did, I don't know that I felt like Ohio State lost any momentum on either side of the ball about how to go about attacking these teams in the playoff.
But it's kind of crazy that that's the way it worked out, considering they shot themselves in the foot on 3 consecutive drives with penalties. Yep. They had a turnover. They had every opportunity to let that get away from them. And to me, I agree with you. That was not a poor game plan. That was not November 30th. That was lack of fundamental executions, or maybe a misunderstanding of what is or isn't legal, because Ohio State has played enough games and they had seen these crews from that conference in the way that they officiate, that, well, maybe you're allowed to just grab defensive linemen or get to the perimeter on a screen and throw somebody to the ground. I didn't hear a whistle on the Austin Sareveld penalty. Some of it was fluky, some of it was out of character, some of it was maybe even nitpicking officiating. It doesn't really matter. I think they were coming a couple times at the end of first down plays, and then you're going to have to go redo it and prove it all over again. I thought that the creativity they showed was great. I thought the question that you asked to Ryan Day already this week about the gravity of Jeremiah Smith, and I think suggesting that Ohio State was doing a disservice by not involving Jeremiah when it was clearly opening up opportunities for Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate in this game. And I said to you on Friday night in the press box on the opening drive, that that's the way they're going to defend Ohio State. Yep. Emeka's going to have 30 catches in this game, and it didn't work out that way. And maybe they went to some other things that they didn't need to at times. But I think all of that was caused by lack of execution with the penalties specific. Even the only time that you correctly predicted that the screen was coming, and that worked out pretty well. The only other time that we knew it was coming, I said that they were obviously going to take that shot on the play action, and that one didn't work out. But those were normally we're able to get in bad game plans, we know what's going to happen like 10 or 15 times. I did not think that happened against Texas. So, maybe we'll be accused of giving the coaching staff too much credit for this, but I don't think that was a bad Chip Kelly game plan. I don't think it was a bad Ryan Day game plan. And I definitely, if you're talking about the defense and the conversation for Jim Knowles, I thought he put together a heck of a game plan.
I thought he had an excellent plan. I know he talked to you on the notebook and said he wanted to maybe have his calls back on those 2 wheel routes. But if you're asking for 2 calls back in a game where I think the defense played 71 snaps, you're doing okay.
Yeah, maybe 2 on each side, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. So it wasn't a flawless plan by Ohio State. Like there were some drives there where maybe, especially on offense, they could have done something a little different than that. Like Texas forced a couple of 3 and outs. Right? I'm not saying it was a perfect game plan, but I guess I wanted to push back a little bit on. I've just been reading a little bit of Texas did what Michigan did and Ohio State struggled again. It's like I think Texas did a reasonable job of trying to replicate what Michigan did, but I thought Ohio State had a much better plan on how to attack that. And if it weren't for the penalties, I don't think anybody would be having that conversation right now.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not saying that the screen was one of the 2 plays the offensive staff would want back. I'm thinking
one worked out pretty well.
Thinking about the toss play where it's like, maybe with your 6'5", 240-pound quarterback, you could sneak it, which they've only done once since Seth McLaughlin went down. Maybe you got to trust Carson Hinsman on that and Will Howard a little bit more. I don't know. That's nitpicking. Both teams had tosses that they didn't execute the way they wanted to.
Yeah, the sneak thing's interesting because that was always, well, obviously an Eagles fan. I don't hide that. When
Go Birds.
Go Birds. When the people talk about the brotherly shove, they talk a lot about Jalen Hurts and very little about like what Jason Kelsey did on that play. And now the Eagles have a new center who is just as capable of doing it. But there's a lot on the center to do that job. And I'm not saying that Carson Hinsman can't do it necessarily. It's a hard thing to work on during the season. So I actually wonder how many reps Carson Hinsman actually has trying to do that. So maybe that's part of it.
It's funny because there was a time, and I think maybe it was after Northwestern, where I don't remember if it was Will Howard who said this to me or if it was Seth or somebody else, but they're like, their goal was to get 10 yards on a quarterback sneak this year because they were in a stretch at that point where they were getting like 4 or 5 every time they were executing that play. And it was like, this is a real weapon. Like you could run it on first down and like get yourself ahead of the chains. And it went from that's the goal and the offensive line is loving it and Will Howard has no issues running a quarterback sneak to now it doesn't even really exist. Well, what a weird thing on a Tuesday to like be focused on. But I am kind of interested in asking Chip Kelly about that because it was a real weapon for Ohio State. And that was a situation where it felt like it was begging for it because it wasn't, to me, it didn't look like, maybe it's not a full yard even. It's a very attainable amount. And I know that Texas is feeling very much this way about Steve Sarkisian and the call down on the goal line that Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom blow up. But like Ohio State didn't block that play that well either. And against really aggressive, talented fronts, I feel like you may have a better chance of moving them just straight ahead instead of trying to move left, lateral, east and west.
Yeah, I think I actually do. You're going into a national championship game where the margins matter, and that is a play that I think encapsulates that. So, is there anything about removing Seth McLaughlin from the equation to just makes that play more difficult to execute for Ohio State? I actually would think that's a worthwhile question for Chip Kelly going into this.
Yeah, don't know what the answer will be because you and I were both chastened by Chip Kelly last week, and sometimes when we ask specific things that might involve the game plan, I know what the answer is because I've now heard it enough times this year that it's like every week is going to be different, and we work on this thing and that thing, and it might work against this opponent and that opponent in this situation, and I'm aware that it might not be answered, but maybe if we drill down specifically on the absence of Seth, we might get a different answer.
I think you might. There are certain things. There are some ball things I think Chip Kelly likes to talk about, and others that get far too close to talking about game plan. He
did tell us in training camp. We were asking about quarterback sneak, or was that even back in spring ball?
Ball, I think it was.
He's like, yeah, we're gonna do it.
Yeah,
He's like, you guys are weirdly hyper focused on quarterback sneaks around here.
I think you'll get a good answer if you ask that question. Yeah.
All right, what else is on your mind?
The Jeremiah thing. Well, I think that Texas did a very good job of taking him away, and Ohio State did a nice job of responding in kind and targeting Emeka, targeting Carnell, targeting G. Scott, targeting the running backs. So that's fine, but he's too good to be a decoy all the time. And I'm not saying that was Ohio State's thought process necessarily. They had a couple of those like RPO. Let's get Jeremiah into the flat plays called up. Texas did a really nice job of sniffing one out on the play where Will Howard got sacked. There was another one that got called back for a penalty. But then he actually had this one catch on a similar kind of play where he got the 3 yards. I do think there's more that can be done to make sure the ball's in his hands more than once a game. And again, that might be infringing too much on game plan stuff for Chip Kelly's liking. But like he's the best receiver in the country, and like Ohio State has other very good ones, so they're fortunate there that they can adapt in a world where Jeremiah does get taken away. But I would ask Chip Kelly, I think the same question I asked Ryan Day on Sunday, which is like what is the balance between using the gravity that Jeremiah provides you and targeting those other guys, with making sure you don't look up at the end of 4 quarters and your most explosive offensive player only has 1 touch.
What did you make of Ryan Day's answer to that? Because I listened to it in real time and then went back and reread it where it was like he said that they didn't execute it correctly. And he wasn't talking specifically about Will Howard, which I just thought was strange.
I think he meant that their lack of execution that stunted their offensive momentum kept them from getting to the plays they were going to call for Jeremiah. That's how I took it. It wasn't so much that like Jeremiah was open and Will didn't throw the ball like that. That's because I don't watching even some of the Skycast cut-ups. I don't really know that I saw that happening all that often. The one play where I thought someone was open and Will forced the ball somewhere else was on the interception when he forces the Jeremiah Smith and Mecca Booker run a really nice route that was open on the backside of that play. I think it was more. I think that was more a comment on the lack of momentum after that first drive, which like they didn't really have until their second to last drive, because even the only other time they scored was a one play drive, right? So it was a lot of, get that first down, as Ryan Day always says, but then like as soon as you got it, you set yourself back with a penalty. So then it's like it was hard for anybody, I think, to get into much of a rhythm, but I think it's especially hard for Jeremiah, especially like when you want to get on like the plus side of the field and take those shots or target Jeremiah in the red zone. I think Ryan Day was feeling like they would have had more opportunities to do that if not for the penalties and the one drive that ended with an interception.
I just thought, and you were sitting next to me, so you know that I'm not saying this in hindsight with 20/20 vision. I thought something bad might happen on that play because it's also that first drive coming out in the third quarter, and the coaches all get, they run down from the press box, they give them some stat sheets, and they go, oh boy, one catch for 3 yards. Like, we got to get Jeremiah a touch right here. And they're going to say the same thing to Will Howard. And Chip Kelly's like, well, this, who's your primary here. He's probably going to get open. He's really freaking good. And Texas took that away. And they took him away throughout the game. But on that specific opportunity, if you're going max protect, play action, and 2 guys into that route, and that's how Emeka was so open. But it's like one of those situations that we've also talked previously through the year, which is like, if there's a play for Jeremiah and he's going to be open, like, just take the shot. And he did that the week before against Oregon. He did that against Tennessee. And sometimes it means it's going to be incomplete and maybe not an interception. But I feel like, they're definitely going to force one here to Jeremiah. And it might cost them.
I think there were a few compounding things there. Like one was that, 2 was that Texas pretty clearly seemed ready for it. I know Ryan Day wasn't super happy with the sell of the run fake on that play either. But then also a lot of times when Ohio State does run that under center 2-man play action pass concept, you get like a deep post and then usually like a dig, or sometimes you'll get a deep post and then like a deep curl. On this, it was both curls. And maybe those are sight adjusted by the wide receivers. I'm not entirely sure. But the fact that like no one went vertical.
Yeah.
There was no space on that side of the field. I wonder like if Jeremiah had actually run the post. And I'm sure in that situation, Ohio State's anticipating that Texas will react, as if Jeremiah is going to run the post, and then maybe you can cut that off and catch that ball in space. But that version of that play in that moment against that defense was probably never going to work.
Yeah, it didn't. And it didn't.
Yeah.
Now that's hindsight. But I was nervous about it for Ohio State because it felt very clearly like they wanted to take that shot, and we knew who it was going to go to, and I think Texas did too.
Yeah, and they had the one other shot, I think, that took the JJ.
Can't believe he didn't catch it, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a standard that he's set here.
It would have been a 10 out of 10 on degree of difficulty, but those are the expectations for him. But yeah, it was Texas wasn't going to get beat over the top.
That's another part of this game plan. Sorry to interrupt you, but like, Carnell Tate dropped a wide open touchdown. Emeka dropped a deep ball that I think
would have sustained one of those drives that had gotten set back.
Yeah, like maybe 80% of the time we expect that he's going to make it. Also very difficult. And even Jeremiah, like, he has to extend. It's difficult. But we've seen him make those difficult catches throughout the year, and it's like maybe unfair. One of them was absolutely needed to be caught. One of them maybe 50-50. Another one, it's just JJ. So you think, like, that's part of it. Like, those shots were there. They took them, and Ohio State didn't execute it in a way that you normally would expect those wide receivers to. So that's very nitpicky. They won the game, and it's against Texas, and you give Texas credit because they had good coverage on those plays. They made Will Howard deliver difficult throws, and they would have been contested, challenging catches. 2 of those 3 that I mentioned, like, they weren't bad plays, they weren't poorly designed, they weren't well thought out. Ohio State, in terms of penalties and moments of blocking or finishing a catch, I said it on Friday night, and I still feel the same way. Like, Texas is very good, but Ohio State played like a C game for me.
I think I would say like a C on offense.
On offense, okay.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I would say maybe like a B+ or an A- on defense.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah,
but that's the point. Like, they could have executed better on offense,
definitely,
and they had opportunities that were not tied to a game plan. So, I I think that is a point worth reiterating. There are a lot of opportunities that were not just penalties that you can point to and say, well, maybe that won't happen again, or maybe it won't happen against a Notre Dame on Monday night next week, and that game could look very different.
I think so. That's why, like, for both coordinators, but Chip Kelly especially, I'm not like there have been times where you've wanted to go into a press conference with Chip Kelly and just like really like kind of drill down on like what was the thought process on this, and this, and like I thought it was pretty clear what their thought process was against Texas. It was just like sometimes you don't love to hear that it's a matter of execution, and there are times where I'll push back on that because I'll disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree from this game. I actually really do think it was majority lack of execution on Ohio State's part.
Yeah, like November 30th, I'd say nope. I'm not going to buy in on that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Last Friday night in the Cotton Bowl, I think that's probably fair. As you said, defensively, that effort was really good. It tested the depth. I think for me, you go in and, Ryan, I wanted to ask Ryan Day about Denzel Burke because it would have been very weird for him to be benched for the entirety of the second half for missing a tackle because he's been playing at a high level since Oregon.
And it was a fluky missed tackle. Like the guy's leg was like a half an inch off the ground, right? It's like Denzel Burke did 99% of what you're supposed to do on that play and just couldn't quite get it done. But it's not like he was playing poorly otherwise. And then the way he jogged off after that play, I thought it was pretty clear that he has something bothering him, whether that's extremities or higher on his upper body. I'm not entirely sure.
That's the first time Ryan Day's actually like upper body extremity.
Yeah.
Like, what could that be?
It's like discussing hockey injuries when a guy's got a broken toe and he says he's got an upper body injury.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like, well, why didn't you just say head? Like, just say it.
Yeah.
It was such a clever wording to it. I know that Ryan Day, we're not going to rehash the way Ohio State talks about injuries or doesn't talk about injuries because that was actually like pretty specific where he was saying, hey, if you think that he might have been in protocol, you were probably right.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything performance based there. I thought Jermaine Matthews played very well when he came into the game. He graded out a champion, as Ryan Day said on Sunday. What a tremendous luxury for Ohio State to be able to take Denzel Burke off the field
really?
and put someone like Jermaine Matthews out there. And maybe Jermaine Matthews has earned himself even more playing time because of the way that he played. I certainly have no issue with Jermaine Matthews playing about as much as Denzel Burke and Davis Igbinosun right now. I don't think that decision was a response to anything other than Denzel Burke not being 100% healthy.
Yeah, so Ryan Day said that Denzel Burke will be ready to go on Monday against Notre Dame. But I think to what extent Jim Knowles would talk about the injuries, who knows? JT's dealing with an ankle.
Mm-hmm.
Cody Simon's got a bionic arm, as I guess is mandatory if you play linebacker at Ohio State for this time of year. You have to put one of those on your shoulder, your elbow. He played that. We saw him in practice wearing some of that stuff, so it wasn't a big surprise. But then he also had a little bit of a moment with the knee. Everybody's banged up at this time of year. Tyleik Williams said that, going into last week that, no one's going to feel 100%. But those are, one guy at every level who's certainly banged up, who's going to be really important, especially JT and Cody Simon against a Notre Dame rushing attack. That's where they're going to make their living. Sonny Styles and Cody Simon are going to need to be, paying full attention to Riley Leonard and being ready to bring some of that wood with Jeremiah Love when he's out there. So it's two things. It's maybe where they are physically, but also how some of the depth has emerged, because we saw that with Jermaine, but we've also seen Kenyatta Jackson in a lot of opportunities in place of JT where he's played very well. He's more of that pass rushing threat rather than JT doing everything right now, but JT's reputation has always been about being really stout against the run. What it would be the confidence level of a Kenyatta Jackson or Edric Houston going in the game at defensive tackle, against what Notre Dame does, because it's different than Texas, it's different than Oregon, and it's different than Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Different challenge. It's also one that Ohio State has seen and prepared for in the last couple of years. So, how does the depth shake out to stop the run? And then if Jermaine has to be out there for 30-plus snaps again, I would imagine they would say very good. They'd feel very confident about it because he just graded out as a champion. But, those are pressing questions that are more about the personnel because I think the scheme has been really good.
I agree. I guess the one thing that I would say that kind of combines both that I am curious about with Jim Knowles is you're going to get a decent amount of 12 personnel, like bigger personnel packages out of Notre Dame. And prior to the playoff, Jim Knowles has always sort of automatically responded to that by going to the 4-3 with Arvell Reese in there at Mike linebacker. He didn't do that against Texas. I don't feel like he's done that much in the playoff. I'd like to ask him more about that, because I want to say, so Texas's starting tight end Gunnar Helm played 70 snaps, all but one. And the one he missed was a play where Sonny Styles gave him the business. And their backup tight end played like
not targeting, by the way.
Not targeting. I don't watch football. That's not targeting. Texas.
Steve Sarkisian. What are you doing, buddy?
I think their backup tight end played like 23 snaps. So I without breaking it down, I think Ohio State probably got like 20-ish something snaps with 12 personnel. But Arvell Reese didn't play 20 snaps. Arvell Reese, I think, only played 6. Jordan Hancock played 64 snaps. He really didn't come off the field, I think, other than some goal line situations. So I'm interested in that evolution of Jim Knowles to now where, like, every year prior to this playoff, he's been very comfortable going to that 4-3. And I don't think it was because he didn't like Jordan Hancock out there or that he was worried about what that might look like. I just think it makes sense to kind of match size with size when you can. But the fact that he's not done that in this playoff makes me wonder if they're going to stick with that and not do it against Notre Dame. I am thinking of the thing that Jim Knowles said when he first got here about sometimes you face 12 personnel that doesn't really play like 12 personnel. And I think that is probably true of Oregon and Texas, and maybe less true about Notre Dame. So does Jim Knowles feel like this is a game where he can continue to just leave Jordan Hancock out there against bigger personnel packages, or might we see the return of the Cody Simon, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese run-centric defensive package for Ohio State?
I wonder if it's related to something that you were talking about, or you have talked about a lot in the last couple of weeks, which is the way that Caleb Downs is being used inside the box. I assume that it's related to that, but to what extent, I don't know.
I would think so too. It's like, as you get, that's the trade-off, right? That 3-high structure with Caleb Downs in the middle at whatever, 8 to 12 yards, depending on the call, has been so effective for Ohio State. I think they actually did get away from it a little bit against Texas. If you look at just Jordan Hancock, I think, had been around 40 snaps of deep safety in the first 2 games, and it was more like 20 in this game. So they did deviate from it some. Like your opponent, makes you do certain things differently. I'm aware of that, but if you do want to play a 4-3, then you kind of can't play Caleb Downs where you've been playing him. So, and you want Caleb Downs around the ball. And no offense to Arvell Reese, who I think is awesome, and I think is going to be a very good linebacker here at Ohio State. I would rather have Caleb Downs and Jordan Hancock on the field right now, I think. So I think that's how they'll roll. But this is something unlike anything else I think Ohio State has seen this year in terms of Notre Dame's offense. I was trying to think of a team that they've played that has run the quarterback between the tackles the way that Riley Leonard's going to, and maybe the closest thing might be Marshall. And I don't even know how much you rely on that because you're playing a Conference USA opponent in September. So, some quarterbacks have scrambled, which we've talked about before, with Drew Aller and Dylan Raiola and Dylan Gabriel obviously scrambled against Ohio State, but this is a lot of designed physical downhill quarterback run game from Notre Dame that I don't have a great feel for how Ohio State's going to try to defend it just because they haven't faced really any of it this year.
But the way Jordan Hancock is tackling, though, you don't have to take him off the field, in my opinion. And I know that people who regularly listen to the podcast daily will be like, oh, Austin's going to talk about this again, where you have to play Jordan Hancock for every snap, and he's obsessed with having him out there. And yeah, that's still true. I am. And at the time that I said it in the spring, I didn't anticipate Arvell Reese being another alien sent down to earth to play defense for Ohio State. And he is he's going to be incredibly fun to watch when he gets a full-time role. And he deserves to be on the field because he seems to make something happen every time he's out there too. But I think the flexibility and versatility, disguise, blitz looks, everything, I think for Ohio State, dating back to when Jim Knowles arrived, revolves around being able to use those 3 safeties more so than 3 linebackers. And Jordan Hancock is the prototype for what he wanted. If you needed Tanner, you thought Tanner McAllister was really important because he knew the defense and was willing to play tough against the run and the pass. Jordan Hancock is the evolutionary version of that. And I think it's just weird to me when there are snaps when he's not out there.
I agree. And the other thing that he does for you, too, and this is important, I think, against a team like Notre Dame, because they're going to want to run the ball and then they're going to want to throw RPOs. And I would just rather have Jordan Hancock and Caleb Downs out there, clouding up those RPO windows than than a linebacker. If it shifts and like it's clear that I don't think this would happen, but if it becomes clear that like Notre Dame's offensive line and tight ends and blocking backs or whatever are too much for Jordan Hancock to handle, then you can make that switch. But I don't think that'll end up being the case. And it's just it's best 11, right? And it's no shade to anybody. It's just I think an endorsement of how good we think Jordan Hancock is, and also how important we believe that the structure that Ohio State has landed on is to them. That I don't think they'll suddenly switch back, but I would like to ask Jim Knowles about how he's arrived at the point where they don't use that as much anymore.
It feels like, in some ways, the same conversation that we're having about like what Notre Dame will do to defend Jeremiah Smith or to take him away. Like, would they go away from their normal structure, which they believe in? They have been very successful with it. Like, would they stop playing man and just like play too high or play some zone to try and take away Jeremiah Smith? And like, I don't believe that they will. And I also, in the same token, I don't believe Ohio State should respond to Riley Leonard or Jeremiah Love by saying, well, we got to have 3 linebackers out there. Like, this is what they do really well. And I don't think that anybody who's tried to line up and just run the football at Ohio State, no matter who's on the field, is, I said this before Tennessee, like, you are not going to have success winning a game purely by running the football, no matter which 11 Ohio State puts out there. They're going to stop it. Like, that's my opinion, and it's based on a full season's worth of evidence.
And beyond that, right? History tells you that. And I think Notre Dame is more like those kind of opponents than not. Because you were saying the same thing about Tennessee, and I was like, I don't know. Tennessee might be a little different. Turns out, well, Dylan Sampson, I guess, didn't play a whole lot, but Ohio State had no problem.
I did get a little bit of a benefit.
Yeah, Ohio State had no problem controlling the run of that game, and I don't think it would have had Dylan Sampson played. But when I think of those conversations, I mostly think of like Wisconsin, and I think Notre Dame is more similar to that. And
good Wisconsin, not this
good Wisconsin's. Yes, good Wisconsin's. Their receivers have popped a little bit in the postseason, but I don't know that they scare me a ton, and maybe that's more of a Riley Leonard throwing the ball down the field conversation than it is one about their receivers necessarily. I just love the idea of like having Caleb Downs parked in the middle of the defense, and it's like Riley Leonard versus Caleb Downs. And whether Riley Leonard is trying to run
who would be favored
or
in that.
Trying to throw those RPOs, like, and I would take Caleb Downs.
I think that'd be a smart move. Yeah. All right, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right,
just want to get to Monday.
Whew. Countdown is on. It is a Talking Tuesday. It has been a look ahead to Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly, who are going to be available later on today, which is Tuesday, and we'll have a live stream of that set up. It'll be back in person. We'll have snap judgments afterwards. There's also going to be some availability with the Buckeyes on Wednesday, so you can look forward to that. The team is traveling on Friday. The podcast is traveling on Thursday, as well as Kings of the North. So there is a lot of coverage coming your way, as you might expect. There's that for every game, but this is a national championship game, so it's dialed up a notch. We're going to try and elevate our games accordingly as well. So stick around for that. Like and subscribe, as Berm is reminding me to ask you. And if you're watching on YouTube, that's right below here. It's like
it's somewhere.
I don't know. It's right over.
Maybe a bell up.
Maybe
here,
it's by Bill. I don't know.
Here.
Like, subscribe, get those alert notifications every time there's content, because there's going to be a lot of it as we get ready for Ohio State and Notre Dame in Atlanta in the College Football Playoff National Championship game. But today's Tuesday. We're going to hear from Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles in a bit. We'll see you there.